Gaura Premanandi, Srila Prabhupada Ki, Ganta Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki, Gaura Premanandi. Om Agyantimandasya Gyananjala Shalakaya Chakshunmalitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manupistam Sthapanamena Bhutale Swayam Upakaramayam Nadati Swavanantikam Namam Vishnupada Krishnapasta Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Govani Pachayane Nivashisha Shrunivari Pashatari Shatarine Vanchakapa Duvasha Kripa Sinvevacha Paditanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Govardhana Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Rama Ramo, Hare Hare. So first of all, I'd like to express my joy and gratitude that I have the opportunity to visit New Govardhana once again after 15 years. It's 15 years ago that I was here last. And maybe since some of you are meeting the first time, let me quickly introduce myself. So my name is Devaki Dasi. I am actually German nationality, but I never lived in Germany as a devotee. So I met Krishna consciousness in Australia in '85 in Kola River, the farm outside of Sydney we had that time. I was 4 years in Sydney in the Brahmatrini ashram. In those days, I sometimes used to come up here and travel all around Australia and collection and so on. So then I was married for 10 years, and in that time we established, we pioneered, by Krishna's mercy, we pioneered the first more organized temple in former Soviet Union. That was from '89 till '99, just when the Iron Curtain fell. So it was quite amazing and a lot of adventure. So then '99, my former husband, left Krishna consciousness. So since then I'm in white, living out of a suitcase, traveling constantly basically. And before the pandemic, I spent 5 months per year around India and Bangladesh, and 7 months per year all around Europe, also North America, Canada, USA, also a lot Eastern Europe. Ukraine has been my main place actually of involvement. So this whole war situation is quite terrible and heartbreaking when you know people there, and I've been there for 22 years, so this is all very, painful. But Krishna must have some plan, so let's see how it all continues. And in my time preaching in Bangladesh, I learned a lot about our Vaishnava culture, because Bangladesh is East Bengal. It's where most of Mahaprabhu's associates come from. And it's quite amazing when you travel there. It's like entering Chaitanya Charitamrita, because the fact that Bangladesh is a Muslim country is actually a blessing in disguise, because the Muslims are not so open for these modern Kali Yuga ideas. So that preserved our Vaishnava culture immensely. And when I'm there, I'm only with the locals. There's no Western devotees living there. So I travel with them, I preach with them, I eat with them, I live with them. And over 22 years, I learned so many things. My whole worldview got put upside down, actually. So that, of course, inspired my personal practice, my preaching, my humble preaching efforts. So then I established a little institute for spiritual culture and put all different courses together, because I realized devotees need some education in how to actually live our philosophy. we are not quite there yet. You know? So now I'm in the process of putting these courses in book form. I've published 4 books now, I'm working on the 5th one. And over the festival I will have a little book table. I've got 2 books with me at the moment, and which I hope you will have some little interest. One of them is on the false ego. The false ego, our constant companion and troublemaker. It has helped me a lot when I put that book together to discover how my false ego gets into my ways almost every day. And it's so subtle, so one can easily miss it. Yeah, so, and after 15 years I have the pleasure of being here again, and I'm doing a whole tour around Australia and New Zealand, and yes, it's been very nice. Good, so let us turn to today's verse. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Rajo Vacha Kutakshatu Bhagavata Maitreyena Sasangamaha Kadavasa Samvada Etadvanayana Prabhu Kutakshatu Bhagavata Maitreyena Sasangamaha Kadavasa Samvada Etadvanayana Prabhu. Rajavacha, the king said, Kutta, wherein? Kshatu, with Vidura, Bhagavata, and with his grace, Maitreyana, with Maitreya, Asa, there was, Sangamaha, meeting, Kada, when, Va, also, Saha, with, Samvada, discussion, Etat, this, Varnaya, describe, Naha, unto me, Prabhu, O my Lord. Translation. The king asked Sukadev Goswami, where and when did the meeting and discussion take place between Saint Vidura and His Grace Maitreya Muni? Kindly oblige, my Lord, and describe this to us. This is a short purport. Exactly as Sonaka Rishi inquired of Sutta Goswami, and Sutta Goswami replied, so Srila Sukadev Goswami replied to King Parikshit's inquiries. The king was very anxious to understand the meaningful discussion that took place between the 2 great souls. So I was asked to also read the next verse, since the purport is more. So I will just read the translation of verse 4. Saint Vidura was a great and pure devotee of the Lord, and therefore his questions to His Grace Rishi Maitreya must have been very purposeful, on the highest level, and approved by learned circles. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Questions and answers among different classes of men have different value. Inquiries by mercantile men in a business exchange cannot be expected to be highly purposeful in spiritual values. Questions and answers by different classes of men can be guessed by the caliber of the persons concerned. In Bhagavad Gita, the discussion was between Lord Krishna and Arjuna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the supreme devotee respectively. The Lord admitted Arjuna to be his devotee and friend, Bhagavad Gita 4.3. And therefore any sane man can guess that the discussion was on the topic of the Bhakti Yoga system. Actually, the whole Bhagavad Gita is based on the principle of Bhakti Yoga. There is a difference between karma and karma yoga. Karma yoga. Karma is regulated action for the enjoyment of the fruit by the performer. But karma yoga is action performed by the devotee for the satisfaction of the Lord. Karma yoga is based on bhakti, or pleasing the Lord, whereas karma is based on pleasing the senses of the performer himself. According to Srimad Bhagavatam, one is advised to approach a bona fide spiritual master when one is actually inclined to question from an elevated level of spiritual understanding. A common man who has no interest in spiritual values has no need to approach a spiritual master just as a matter of following fashion. As a student, Maharaj Parikshit was serious about learning the science of God, and Sukadeva Goswami was a bona fide spiritual master in the transcendental science. Both of them knew that the topics discussed by Vidura and Rishi Maitreya were elevated, and thus Maharaj Parikshit was very interested in learning from the bona fide spiritual master. So the chapter we are starting here is entitled Questions by Vidura, and I want to use this opportunity to discuss the importance of inquisitiveness, because this is actually the main topic of the verses, the importance of inquiring and meaningful inquiry. Right? The purport here of the fourth verse starts, questions and answers among different classes of men have different value. So inquiries by mercantile men in a business exchange cannot be expected to be highly purposeful in spiritual values. So I remember also reading another purport where Prabhupada says, so this question and answer we find actually in all species of life, even amongst the birds. You know, there's always some chirping, some talk going on, where is food? Where is sense enjoyment? Where is the enemy? So this discussion is going on. But human form of life, there should be higher inquiry. It should not be all about where is food and where is sense gratification. But there should be higher inquiry from great learned souls. We should inquire. And actually, this topic of being inquisitive is very important. Even in this purport, Prabhupada makes this point. A common man who has no interest in spiritual values has no need to approach a spiritual master just as a matter of following fashion. So actually, this quality of being inquisitive is highly important in order to become a true disciple. There has to be this inquisitiveness there. Otherwise, if that's not there, well, then our acceptance of Guru may be simply an external thing, a following a fashion, if that inquisitiveness is not there. And also, Rupa Goswami tells us that to achieve Krishna, we need that one and main foremost qualification, that greed, that lolyam for Krishna. So if that lolyam, that greed is there, that practically manifests as being inquisitive. In the same way, how the mercantile person, he is greedy for money, So he will be inquisitive in how to increase his wealth and how to maintain it and. So whenever there is a greed, a certain greed there for anything, it will manifest as being inquisitive. So if we are greedy for Krishna, there has to be this mood of inquisitiveness there. And also we can say, actually, if we hear attentively and we try to apply what we hear, then there should be some questions. There should be some questions. Otherwise, very easily the hearing just goes in one ear, out the other. It doesn't really hit the heart and transforms the heart, and then there may be no questions. But if we are actually hearing attentively with that urge to also apply what we hear, then surely there will be some questions like that. So inquisitiveness is actually much more than just having a question. It's a certain state of heart where we have this burning desire to hear, to find out how to make advancement, how to overcome our obstacles in devotional life, how to achieve Krishna. That burning desire there. So being inquisitive can also mean we don't have a question, but that burning desire to understand and move forward is there. And therefore we hear like a dry sponge sucking up every drop of nectar which is available. That's basically a deeper way of understanding what is inquisitiveness. And in Harinam Chintamani, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in regards to chanting, he gives us these 3 levels of attentiveness in chanting. Attentiveness on the level of the body, or inattentiveness, that means laziness and sleep. Inattentiveness on the level of the mind means distraction. And inattentiveness on the level of the heart, which is of course the main and foremost one, the most crucial one, that's indifference. And interestingly, these 3 levels of attentiveness are there in all aspects of service, no matter what it may be, and definitely also in hearing. So inattentiveness on the level of the body in hearing means laziness and sleep. We're falling asleep. In the Bhagavatam class, it happens quite a lot. So then inattentiveness on the level of the mind means we are there, but the mind is all over the place and we are actually not hearing. So attentiveness or inattentiveness on the level of the heart is this indifference, where we simply sit and, all right, yes, the rule of the ashram residence is we have to be in the Bhagavatam class. I don't know if it's here like that, but in many temples. Okay, so we just sit off our time there, but there is no burning desire to actually hear and understand. There's indifference in the heart. So therefore the heart is not involved. And therefore the hearing will not transform the heart. And therefore there will definitely be no inquisitiveness or anything like that. You know? And even other services, no matter what it may be, you know, dressing the deities or cooking, that attentiveness on these 3 levels has to be there in order to transform the heart. Because that's what Bhakti Yoga is all about. We want to transform the heart. And in order for the heart to be transformed, the heart has to be involved. So even when we dress the deities, you know, hopefully we don't fall asleep, but we may be lazy, just doing the bare minimum. so we get away with it. Or we may be thinking of so many things, we're distracted. And yeah, this indifference, where, well, we can take it or leave it. We do the bare minimum. That's the indifference in the heart. So no matter what service we perform, if we perform it with this indifference, will not have any effect. So that's why it also says, Satatam Kirtayantamam Yatanta Satvatavata, always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination. So this endeavoring with great determination, it's one of the main keys to develop bhakti, actually. That no matter what we do, we have to do with maximum effort, as good as possible, give our everything. That kind of service mood very quickly transforms the heart. So going back to inquisitiveness, we can say inquisitiveness is the opposite of hearing in indifference, right? That's actually inquisitiveness, hearing without indifference, but with greed, with luriam, trying to understand and pick something up which will be helpful for our devotional practice. So actually there is also a nice, over the last 22 years, I have made my own verse book here, copying anything that is really powerful and to the point of the purports, verses, letters from other acharyas, whatever I come across, I copy this in my book. There's a nice purport in 2.824, so you read that already a while ago, where Prabhupada makes again this point about the importance of inquisitiveness. Prabhupada says, the spiritual master is always prepared to impart knowledge to the disciple, and especially when the disciple is very inquisitive. Inquisitiveness on the part of a disciple is greatly necessary for the progressive disciple. Maharaj Parikshit is a typical disciple because he is perfectly inquisitive. If one is not very inquisitive about self-realization, one need not approach a spiritual master simply to make a show of his discipleship. So it's a very similar point as Prabhupada makes in this purport, that he says a common man who has no interest in spiritual values has no need to approach a spiritual master just as a matter of following fashion. So the other purport even stronger. It's just a show, if there is no inquisitiveness there. It's just a fashion, a show. No need. So quite strong, And actually, this inquisitiveness should not only there towards Guru, but actually towards any more experienced devotee. This is how we associate with seniors, that we offer service and we inquire. Pariprashnena sevaya, Pariprashna is inquiry, and sevaya, offering service. That's how we are meant to take advantage of any more experienced devotee. That we offer service, we inquire, we want to squeeze some nectar out of this person. Because devotees have a lot to share, but sadhu will not speak unless he is asked. Because he knows if the person is not inquisitive, doesn't matter what he says, it will not fall on fertile ground. The person doesn't want to hear unless there is inquisitiveness there. So it's actually a very important principle in Vaishnava association. Whenever devotees meet, unless one person is inquisitive and is eager to hear, and the other person has something uplifting to share, then no nectar will flow. Then it will just be small talk, right? But if one person is eager to hear and the other person wants to share something uplifting, then the nectar will flow. Then there will be some uplifting exchange. Uplifting for the speaker, uplifting for the hearer, for both sides. But if that's not there, yes, then it's just, hi Paul, how are you? Nice to meet you. Of course, like that we usually start with relationships, with exchanges, but then there should be something deeper. Otherwise, it's just small talk. I like to call such relationships Haribo relationships, where the exchange doesn't go beyond the hi Bo, how are you? Nice to see you. Yes, I'm running. I have some seva and you know. It's a very, it's a bit shallow and external exchange. So there should be something deeper to really nourish our spiritual life, actually, you know, because devotee association is so important. So we are meant to nourish and uplift each other from whatever level we are standing. And then, you know, the Vaishnava association is, very supportive and nourishing. So I actually remember once, this was when I was in Ukraine, I was invited for lunch at devotee's house, one family, and they were reasonably, they were 10, 15 years in Krishna consciousness or something. So, and maybe you have observed this also, these days people more like to talk themselves about themselves rather than to inquire. You know, everybody's eager to talk about themselves rather than to inquire from the other person. So yes, when I visited these devotees, they were just talking, what they all did and what they're involved in and so on and so on. And then I thought, let me ask them some questions to somehow get a little on deeper levels or something. But somehow the discussion was not going anywhere deeper, you know. So, and then it was quite interesting. She was putting out a magazine about her guru's activities. So she asked me whether she could do an interview with me. And I said, yeah, fine, why not? So then, you know, with this reason to make the interview, she actually asked me questions. And then at a certain point, the whole mood changed because she actually became inquisitive. And then all of a sudden, we had such deep exchanges and discussions. And I was simply smiling to myself, thinking, yes, well, unless one is eager to hear and one person has something uplifting to share, there's no real deeper transcendental nectar flowing. But then on the plea of doing this interview, she actually came to some questions, and she all of a sudden got personally interested, and she became inquisitive. And then the whole atmosphere immediately changed, you know. So that's the point. And I mean, Rupa Goswami also expresses that in the 6 loving exchanges, Guyam Akyati Prichyati, you know, is one person confidentially inquires and another person confidentially shares something. So that's actually one of the 6 loving exchanges between devotees, you know. And that confidentiality is centered around how to move forward and achieve pure devotional service. Not confidentially my private life, what my husband, my wife said and did and whatever, and don't tell anybody, it's confidential. So no, confidentiality is centered around our aspirations to actually develop pure bhakti, and how to move forward, how to overcome obstacles, and yeah, so interesting also to understand in Bhagavad Gita 269, Krishna says, what is day to the materialist is night to the introspective sage, and vice versa. What is day to the spiritualist is night to the common person. So in other words, what is success and the topmost in spiritual life will be considered to be a loser and a failure in material life. That's how different material life and spiritual life are. Yes. And it's interesting, this day-night principle actually accompanies us through many different aspects of devotional life. Like, for example, highly important qualities such as tolerance, highly important quality in devotional life. To be tolerant, it's almost a criteria for measuring a person's spiritual advancement and spiritual strength, in how tolerant a person can be. Haridas Thakur, Prahlad Maharaj, they are famous examples. Right? But then, for materialists, tolerance means weakness. Not being able to stand up for yourself and fight for your rights and what? I'm not going to tolerate that. Who am I to tolerate? Forget it. So opposite. Right? Yes. And same also with inquisitiveness. Inquisitiveness, such an important quality as we were establishing briefly. But from a mundane point of view, to be inquisitive is almost, again, to be a loser. What? You don't know? Really? You don't know? Well, I know. How come you don't know? Yes. Nobody wants to admit they don't know something. And people feel embarrassed to inquire, looking like a fool, Yes, yes. So it's almost a shameful condition if you don't know something. And people pretend that they know everything. Even when these days nobody needs to ask for directions because everybody's got the GPS thing there and so on. But 20, 30 years ago, when that was not available, if you ask somebody for the way to go, people often don't know. But rather than saying, sorry, I don't know, they just tell you something and send you in the opposite direction. So people don't like to admit that they don't know something, right? Yeah. So there we have again these opposite values. What is success? Being inquisitive in spiritual life is seen to be foolish, and being a loser in mundane life. And this I know, very often we come across that when we want to explain something to somebody. I know. So these two words, I know, is probably what blocks us the most from any kind of learning experience. Because if you know already, oh well, all right, you know it all, good, fine. So then we cannot really learn and pick up something. But the humble Vaishnava attitude is, I don't know, I'm a fool. So let me hear something, let me try to capture something which is relevant for my life, for my devotional practice. Yes, and of course inquisitiveness, inquiry, should again be done in a humble mood, not in a challenging mood. We sometimes also come across that, that we inquire in a provocative and challenging mood. So what happens there when we inquire in a challenging mood? It's the false ego, our constant companion and troublemaker, that gets in our way, and then the inquiry becomes challenging. In other words, the person inquiring considers himself to know better, and therefore he challenges. So that's the effect of the false ego. And false ego has such a contaminating effect. So any good idea or even good question can completely be contaminated through the false ego when it is presented with false ego. I know better. It contaminates the whole atmosphere. We may have experienced this practically when there is a person in the audience that inquires in a challenging mood, then immediately, the whole atmosphere is very loaded and contaminated, basically. So that's why Shastric injunction is the inquiry should be in a humble state of mind and not in a provocative way. And of course, when we inquire, we should also be ready to accept the answer, especially from Guru. Prabhupada here connects the whole topic of inquiring from Guru, the importance to approach a spiritual master and inquire from him. I remember one Guru once shared with me privately what he considers the biggest challenge in being a Diksha Guru. And he was saying, biggest challenge is that you can exactly see what instruction you should give to your disciple, but because you know he is not ready to accept it, therefore you can't give it. Wow. So actually it means to truly take shelter of Guru means that we also are ready to accept his instructions, that we want to be corrected by him. That's what it means to actually take shelter. Otherwise, if we are not ready to hear and accept and be corrected, we haven't quite yet taken shelter. Yes. So if this is even going on in connection with the Guru, what to speak of senior devotees or something, So actually this sheltering relationships, taking shelter of seniors who are more experienced than we are, and being eager to inquire from them and also take guidance from them, very important in order to move forward in spiritual life. In fact, we can save ourselves so many miserable situations in life if we would just be ready to inquire and accept advice and guidance from somebody who has already more experience than we have. So many suffering conditions we can save ourselves, but unfortunately we often think we know and we can work it all out ourselves, and then we often create so many miserable conditions in our life, and oh my God, and then maybe we are ready to come and ask somebody for guidance. But we could avoid that all if we would ask for guidance before we make some decisions, Yes, so also the similar thought is there when we ask for blessings, it's like, we can say it's like the culture, in spiritual life, that we ask for blessings of seniors. But actually the real blessing is to ask for guidance before we make a decision. But what we often do is we make our own decision and then we go to a senior person and say, oh, please give me your blessings. I want to do this, do that, marry this person, marry that person, go to India, whatever it may be. Please give me your blessings. So blessings, it's not some mystical thing, you're blessed. No, the true blessing is to ask for guidance before we make the decision. Then we get the real blessings. But just making our own decision and then asking for blessings, we kind of cheat ourselves almost, because we don't get the real thing. As that Guru was sharing with me, he sees exactly what instruction the disciple should get, but he knows he's not willing to accept, therefore he can't get it, give it. So the true blessings we get when we inquire and we ask for guidance before we make a decision. Then we get the real thing, what will be helpful for us to actually make progress. And without this inquiry from more experienced devotees, very easily we can actually become rather stagnant in our spiritual life. I come across this quite a lot. I'm the type of person who always analyzes. I come from medical background, I used to work as a physiotherapist in Germany. So I still have this therapist approach in preaching, that I try and make the diagnose, what is missing here, what is needed here, so what's the treatment, and then are we taking the treatment, are we taking the medicine? Not just describing the medicine, but we have to also take it. So often I come across this, unfortunately, that we can become rather stagnant, and even after 30, 40 years, well, there's still the same material desires, same attachments, same bad habits, And we may even get some doubts in the process of Krishna consciousness. Well, I've practiced for 30 years and still, nothing much has really changed in the heart. So these things happen when we don't accept guidance, when we don't have a mentor or a counselor in our life, a well-wishing, more experienced friend who has no other interest except my spiritual growth and development. To have such a relationship, that's a true blessing to have, to capture a Vaishnava's interest in our spiritual journey, in our spiritual growth. Yes. Otherwise, easily we can end up like in the hamster wheel. We know the hamsters are active animals, they like to run. So we put a little wheel in the cage, and the hamster runs, but doesn't go anywhere, So that can easily happen in our spiritual practice. We run, and we seem to, be so busy and run, but we are not maybe moving as nicely forward as we could, and that easily happens out of lack of inquiry and accepting guidance. And I mean, to finish off, interesting that all Shastra actually came about through one person inquiring and one person giving the answers. Bhagavad Gita, Krishna acted like the mentor to Arjuna. He was confused, so he inquired. And Bhagavatam also, so many levels of inquiry and answer there. So that's how important this inquiry is. Even Chaitanya Charitamrita, Ramananda Roy Mahaprabhu. So one person inquiring, one person giving the uplifting answer, so very important. Okay, so 2 minutes left for questions. Do we have anything? Yes.
Mataji, I was wondering, ISKCON these days is so large and so diverse, and there's so many devotees with, even senior devotees with very varying, extremely varying perspectives. So how should somebody choose the right person to inquire from? Like how do we utilise the role of discrimination in choosing who, like, where to actually get proper guidance? Because sometimes if someone approaches the wrong person, they get very, very confused.
Yes. Yes, a good question. On this topic, I do have a book also. Of course, I don't want to make from the Vyasa-san here advertisement for the books I got with me. But yeah, the one is on false ego, and the other one is entitled Children Relationships. So in that book, there is a whole chapter on the qualifications we have to have in order to give guidance, meaning serving as a mentor, as a counselor. Yes. And very useful to know these qualifications, because as you say, if we take shelter of a person who is not so qualified, we may either get the wrong guidance or we may somehow in other ways be disappointed. Yes. So, like a few qualifications, one of them is that one should be rightly situated in one's ashram, because if one is not properly situated, then very easily there's unfulfilled needs. And these unfulfilled needs enter that sheltering relationship. But the person giving guidance should be completely selfless. There should be no personal motive, even not on the most subtle platform, if satisfying one's emotional needs by giving that person shelter, then it is already not selfless. And then very easily you can find yourself in an unwanted and unfavorable situation, Yes, and there's so many other qualifications there, But yeah, one has to be in knowledge what to look for, If we look for gold, we have to know what does gold look like. Otherwise, we mix it up with some imitation thing, Yes. Yes, last question.
You mentioned tolerance. So in every institution, community, you get one or more persons who, a bit overbearing. They like to tell everybody what they should be doing. So at what point, like how much should you be tolerating, or at what point should that person be told that, this is too much?
Okay. Yes, tolerate, but how much can we tolerate? Well, see, there's different perspectives. When something, when somebody comes towards us in an overbearing way, it depends on our advancement, basically, how much we can tolerate, But it is a good attitude to have, to say, well, why is Krishna putting me in this situation? After all, not a blade of grass is moving without Krishna's sanction. What is Krishna trying to teach me? So, and maybe it is an opportunity simply to cultivate tolerance. That is definitely a favorable attitude to have. Of course, if there's some outright abuse, that's a different thing. So we don't tolerate abuse just for the sake of, tolerance or something. But that should come from others then. Other people have to, speak up. you know? Yes. So from the person giving that heavy treatment, you know, he should understand, no, this is Vaishnava Aparat. I'm supposed to be, you know, uplifting and kind and merciful with devotees, you know, so Vaishnava Aparat is the most dangerous thing for my spiritual life. So if I'm constantly chastising and having people out, well, Krishna may not like it, and it may block my spiritual growth and development. And if that person cannot see it himself, well, that's why it's good to have a mentor. You know, because if everybody has this trusting relationship with and he wants to be corrected by that person, then it shouldn't be a problem that somebody who is close to that person says, hey, you know, just take it easy on these young devotees and don't heavy them out and, you know. Yes, like that. But of course, abusive situations cannot be tolerated, you know. But yeah, there's a fine line, what is abusive and what is just, somebody has some heavy planets there, you know, so this has to be seen by senior devotees, you know. Yes. Yes.
There's a nice prayer quote in the 13th chapter of Gita. Prabhupada quotes a verse from the 10th canto of that page of Prabhupada. And then he explains the verse, and he said, the devotee thinks these things are happening to me because of my past misdeeds. And then he sums up and says, therefore, it is better to suffer than protest.
Therefore, it's better to
Suffer than protest.
Wow. Yeah, well, yes, that's the humble Vaishnav mood, to say, well, actually Krishna gives me only one drop of what I really deserve, you know? And I must have been such a rascal, maybe in previous lives, maybe in this life, so now Krishna is giving me what I meant to suffer, you know? But again, one has to be careful with abuse, you know. we cannot justify abuse in that way. Well, Prabhupada says it's better to suffer, so here suffer. You know, so it's a fine line, you know.
If you're advanced enough to tolerate it, then you benefit from it.
Yes.
And if someone else is committing abuse, they're going to get the reactions.
Yes.
You look at Tamil Nadu and how much abuse did he take, but that's because he was very advanced.
Yes, yes. Yeah, so how much we can tolerate is really a question of our spiritual advancement and spiritual strength, and really seeing Krishna in the picture and taking shelter in my relationship with Krishna. Because that's the thing, whatever may come to us, actually it has nothing to do with my relationship with Krishna. That's the eternal relationship, eternal reality. So the more we are situated and fixed in this eternal reality of my relationship with Krishna, the less we will get disturbed by whatever comes towards us, because we simply take shelter in that reality. And that's a practical thing we can also remember for our own life. I often remember this, you know, if I'm facing some situations, that I tell myself, thank God, this has nothing to do with my relationship with Krishna. It's just part of the crazy circus here, the nonsensical stage performance, as Prabhupada calls it, you know. So that's what personalities like Haridas Thakur or Prahlad Maharaj do. They simply escape the crazy circus and take shelter in my relationship with Krishna. That's eternal reality. Everything else, at the moment of death, curtain closes, it's all over, all finished, has no significance, you know. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for your kind attention. Srila Prabhupada ki, Samavita Bhaktivinoda ki, Gaura Premanandi.